A millionaire is stunned after years apart, seeing her again inside a hospital. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's emotional journey. Have you ever found someone again after so many years apart, in a place you never expected? Let's see what happens when Jason encounters Emily again in the most surprising way possible. The city was alive with the hum of life, but Jason Montgomery stood still, gazing out the window of his high-rise office. The rain poured down in sheets, blurring the world outside. He couldn't focus, couldn't stop the memories flooding back to him. Emily. The name echoed in his mind, a name that was both his greatest regret and his deepest love. It had been 5 long years since he had last seen her, since he made the decision that destroyed everything they had. The weight of that decision pressed down on him like a ton of bricks. He had chosen his empire over her, the cold steel of ambition taking precedence over the warmth of her love. He had been a fool. The memories were sharp, clear. The night they fought, the night she walked away, and the months that followed where he buried himself in work to numb the pain. But even now, in the cold silence of his penthouse, that pain was still there, gnawing at him, reminding him of what he had lost. He had lost her, forever. Jason leaned against the glass, the city lights casting a soft glow around him. He should have done more. He should have fought for her. But now it was too late. Or was it? His phone buzzed, snapping him from his thoughts. He glanced at the screen, expecting another business call. But what he saw made his heart skip a beat. It was from the hospital. The message was short, urgent. Emergency contact needed. Emily Stevens. Condition critical. His hands shook as he read the message again. Emily. She was here? She was alive? The memories came rushing back, faster now. A flood of guilt, regret, and fear. Without thinking, he grabbed his coat and rushed out of the office, his mind spinning with questions. As he entered the hospital, his heart was pounding in his chest. He wasn't sure what he expected, but certainly not to see her again, especially not like this. The sterile, white hallways seemed to stretch on forever, but he couldn't stop, couldn't slow down. He needed to find her. He needed to know she was okay. A nurse led him to a private room. The door opened, and Jason felt his breath catch in his throat. There, lying in the bed, pale and unconscious, was Emily. His heart shattered. She looked so fragile, so different from the strong, vibrant woman he once knew. Her hair was messy, her face gaunt, and the beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound in the room. For a moment, Jason stood frozen. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. He had lost her once, but now, here she was again, and it felt like a cruel twist of fate. He took a shaky step forward, his heart racing. He wanted to reach out to her, to hold her hand, to apologize for everything he had done. But he couldn't. What could he say? How could he make up for all the years of silence? The door closed softly behind him, and he was left alone with her. His eyes traced the lines of her face, the curves of her jaw that he had memorized so many years ago. God, how he missed her. He stepped closer, reaching out to touch her hand. His fingers brushed against hers, and it was like a jolt of electricity ran through him. The memories flooded back again. The laughter, the love, the way she had looked at him, so full of hope. He had let her down. He had betrayed that hope. And now, here she was, lying in front of him, vulnerable and hurt. Jason bent down slowly, brushing a strand of hair from her face, his heart breaking all over again. I'm so sorry, Emily. His voice was barely a whisper as he spoke, though he wasn't sure if she could hear him. I've never stopped loving you, he said quietly. He leaned back in the chair beside her bed, waiting, praying for any sign that she could hear him, that she would wake up. But the seconds turned into minutes, and the minutes turned into hours. Time seemed to stand still in that room, the silence only broken by the soft beeping of the machines keeping her alive. He had no idea how long he had been sitting there, lost in his thoughts. His world had stopped spinning the moment he saw her again. But that world was changing now, and so was he. Jason sat by Emily's bedside, the steady beep of the heart monitor the only sound that filled the room. His heart was heavy, his mind racing with thoughts of regret. It had been years since he had seen her, and now, here she was, lying in a hospital bed, vulnerable and broken. The woman who once held his heart, the woman he had let slip away, was right in front of him. But this time, it felt different. He could feel her presence even though she wasn't awake. The memories of their time together flooded his mind, bringing with them a sense of guilt he could no longer ignore. He had failed her, and now he had to find a way to make things right. Emily had always been the one thing that grounded him, the one person who saw past the cold exterior he had built around himself. But ambition had clouded his judgment. He had pushed her away, thinking that success and wealth would fill the emptiness he felt inside. He was wrong. The emptiness only grew. The decision to let her go haunted him every single day. But now he had a second chance. He wasn't sure how or why, but he knew he couldn't let this moment slip away. He had to make it count. As hours passed, Jason remained by her side, unable to tear himself away. His fingers hovered over hers, but he couldn't bring himself to take her hand. He was afraid that she would reject him, that she would remember the man who had hurt her and not the one who was sitting here now, desperate for her forgiveness. He could already hear the voice in his head telling him to walk away, to let her go and move on. But he couldn't. Not this time. Emily's slow, shallow breathing was the only reassurance he had that she was still alive, still fighting. But for how long? How long could he sit there, waiting for a miracle that may never come? Jason's thoughts were interrupted by the soft sound of footsteps approaching the door. He looked up, startled, as a nurse entered the room, her presence a stark contrast to the quiet, still atmosphere. She smiled gently, but there was a sadness in her eyes. "She's stable for now," the nurse said softly, her voice calm. "But we don't know when she'll wake up." Jason nodded, grateful for the news, but it didn't ease the tension in his chest. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice hoarse. The nurse hesitated for a moment, her eyes flicking to Emily, then to Jason. "She's lucky to have someone who cares," she said quietly before turning and leaving the room, leaving Jason alone with his thoughts. Alone with the woman who had once been his everything. Jason looked back at Emily, his heart aching with the weight of the years they had lost. Could he make it up to her? Could he fix the mess he had made of their relationship? The questions lingered in his mind, but the only thing he knew for certain was that he had to try. The man he was now, the man who had built his empire on the back of cold ambition, was no longer the man he wanted to be. He had changed. Emily had changed him. And now, he was going to prove it. The hours turned into days, and Jason remained by Emily's side, never leaving, never straying far. He watched as her conditions slowly improved, and with each passing day, a part of him dared to hope. But he was also terrified. Terrified that when Emily woke up, she would look at him with the same coldness he had once shown her. The woman he had pushed away so many years ago was not the same person. She had moved on, built a life without him. She was strong. He admired her strength, but he feared it meant she no longer needed him. One evening, as the sun began to set and the room was bathed in a soft, golden light, Emily's fingers twitched. Jason's heart skipped a beat as he watched her hand move slightly, a sign of life. Was this the moment? Was she waking up? He held his breath as he leaned closer, his eyes locked on her face. Slowly, ever so slowly, her eyelids fluttered open. For a moment, her gaze was unfocused, confused, as if she didn't know where she was. But then, her eyes met his. Jason's heart raced as he held her gaze, unsure of what to say, unsure of how to make things right. Emily's lips parted, and for the first time in years, Jason heard her voice again. "Jason," she whispered, her voice weak but unmistakable. The sound of her name on his lips brought tears to his eyes. She remembered him. After everything, she remembered him. He leaned closer, his voice filled with emotion. "I'm here, Emily," he whispered, his heart swelling with relief. "I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." As Jason sat by Emily's side, her quiet breath, the steady beeping of the heart monitor, and the soft rustling of the sheets were the only sounds that filled the room. His emotions were a tangled mess. He had waited for this moment for so long, and now that it had finally arrived, he didn't know what to say. His heart ached with the weight of years lost, of a love he had once taken for granted, of the cruel reality that their time together had slipped away because of his choices. As he looked at her, her eyes still heavy with the grogginess of awakening, Jason's breath caught in his throat. She was here, and she remembered him. But where did they go from here? The silence between them grew, and Jason felt the weight of it. He had done so much wrong, and now, after all this time, he needed to find the courage to make things right. Emily slowly blinked, as if adjusting to the reality around her. Her gaze slowly focused on him, and for the first time in years, Jason felt seen. Jason. Her voice was weak, but it was enough to send a rush of warmth through him. She remembered. After everything, after all the pain and the distance, she still remembered him. It felt like a lifetime ago that he had been the one to let her go, but in this moment, sitting beside her, it felt like they were still connected. "You're here," Emily whispered, her words tinged with disbelief. "I'm here," Jason responded softly, his voice thick with emotion. "I've been here the whole time." He hesitated, unsure of what to say next. His mind was racing with everything he wanted to express, but the words wouldn't come. There was too much. Too many years of mistakes, of regrets, of broken promises. He wanted to apologize, to tell her how sorry he was, how much he had changed, but in that moment, the only thing that mattered was that they were here, together. Emily slowly reached out, her hand trembling slightly as she took his. The touch was tentative, uncertain, but it was enough to bridge the gap that had been growing between them for so long. Jason held her hand gently, his thumb brushing against her skin, a silent promise that he wasn't going anywhere. "I thought I lost you," Jason said, his voice breaking. "I thought you were gone for good." Emily's eyes softened, but there was a hint of sadness in them. "I thought the same thing," she admitted quietly. "But here we are." Her words were simple, but they carried so much weight. Here they were, two people who had once been so sure of each other, now uncertain, but still connected. Jason looked at her, searching her face for any sign of what she was thinking, what she was feeling. But all he could see was the same woman he had loved so deeply, the same strength and vulnerability that had always drawn him to her. "How did we get here?" he asked quietly, his voice full of wonder and regret. Emily took a deep breath, her eyes never leaving his. "We got here because we're both still alive," she said softly. "We got here because we both have a second chance." Jason felt a lump form in his throat as he processed her words. A second chance. Was that really what they had? Or was it just another fleeting moment in time that would slip away from them, like all the others? "Do you want a second chance?" Jason asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily didn't answer right away. Instead, she closed her eyes for a moment, gathering her thoughts. When she opened them again, her gaze was steady. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But maybe, just maybe, we can try." Jason's heart soared at her words, but a part of him remained cautious. He knew how much they had lost, how fragile this moment was. But in that instant, he realized something. The past didn't matter anymore. What mattered was now. What mattered was the chance to build something new, something real, even if it meant starting over. He leaned forward slightly, his hand still holding hers. "We'll take it one day at a time," he said quietly. "But I'm not going anywhere. I promise." Emily nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Neither am I," she whispered. And for the first time in years, Jason felt a sense of peace settle over him. The years of pain, the regrets, the lost time, they didn't matter as much anymore. What mattered was the present. What mattered was the chance to rebuild, to heal, and to love again. As they sat together in the dimly lit hospital room, Jason and Emily didn't have all the answers. But they had something they hadn't had in a long time. Hope. And hope was all they needed to start their journey again. Days passed since that fateful moment when Emily had finally opened her eyes. Jason sat by her side every day, just as he had promised. The sterile hospital room, once cold and unfamiliar, had slowly become a place of quiet healing, not only for Emily but for both of them. There were still moments of silence, moments when neither of them knew what to say, but those moments were no longer filled with fear. They were simply comfortable. For the first time in a long time, Jason allowed himself to believe in the possibility of a future with her. As Emily's strength returned, so did the flickers of hope in Jason's heart. Each day, he saw more of the woman he had loved all those years ago, her sharp wit, her warmth, the way she could light up a room with just a smile. But there were still walls. Emily had made it clear that she was open to the idea of starting over, but there was no rush, no expectation. And Jason respected that. He knew he didn't deserve to ask for more, but every time she smiled at him, his heart beat a little faster, a little stronger. The days they spent together were not filled with grand gestures or declarations, but they were meaningful. They spent hours talking about everything and nothing, slowly rebuilding their connection. The past was still a shadow between them, but it didn't feel as heavy anymore. There were days when Emily would laugh, her eyes sparkling as they shared old stories, memories they had once forgotten. Other times, there was silence, but it was the kind of silence that spoke volumes. It wasn't awkward or forced. It was peaceful. It was healing. Emily was still recovering physically, but Jason noticed small changes in her, changes that gave him hope. Her fingers gripped his more firmly each time he took her hand. She would rest her head on his shoulder as they sat together, the weight of her body against his, a quiet reassurance that things were moving forward, even if it was at a slow pace. But despite the progress, Jason could feel the lingering doubt in Emily's eyes. She was still uncertain, still cautious. And who could blame her? He had betrayed her trust once before. Could she really trust him again? Could he trust himself? Jason spent countless hours wrestling with his own thoughts. His feelings for her were clearer than ever, but he knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Healing took time. Trust took time. And while Jason was ready to move forward, he wasn't sure if Emily was. One evening, after another long day of quiet conversations and small moments, Emily finally spoke what had been on her mind. She was sitting up in bed, the soft glow of the bedside lamp casting a warm light over her face. Jason was sitting in the chair beside her, his gaze never leaving her. "Jason," she began, her voice soft but steady. "I need to know why now." Jason's heart skipped a beat. He had known this question was coming, but hearing it out loud made his chest tighten. He took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "I don't know," he admitted honestly. "I've spent so many years focusing on the wrong things, building this empire, thinking that success would fill the emptiness inside me. But it never did. Not until I lost you." Emily's gaze softened, but her expression remained guarded. "And now you think you can just pick up where we left off?" Jason paused, feeling the weight of her words. He had no right to ask her that. He had no right to expect anything from her after everything he had done. "I don't expect anything," he said quietly. "I don't deserve anything. But I'm here now, Emily, and I'm not going anywhere. I just want the chance to show you who I am now. I want the chance to make things right." Emily looked at him for a long time, her eyes searching his face as if looking for something. Jason couldn't read her expression, but he knew that this was a turning point. This moment would determine everything. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Emily sighed and looked down at her hands. "I'm scared," she admitted softly. "I'm scared of opening myself up to you again. I'm scared of getting hurt." Jason's heart broke at her words. He had known how much pain he had caused her, but hearing her say it out loud hit him harder than he had imagined. "I'm scared too," he said quietly, "but I'm willing to face that fear if it means having a chance with you." Emily was silent for a moment, and Jason held his breath, waiting for her to speak. Finally, she looked up at him, her eyes full of vulnerability. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's try." It wasn't a promise, not yet, but it was a start. And for Jason, that was everything. He smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. "You won't regret it." As Emily leaned back into her pillows, Jason stayed by her side, his hand gently holding hers. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, they were facing it together. It wasn't going to be easy, and there would be challenges ahead, but they had taken the first step, and that was enough. Days turned into weeks, and the rhythm of Emily's recovery became a comforting routine. Jason remained by her side, never straying far, but there was still an unspoken tension in the air between them. They had started fresh, but the past was never too far away, lingering in their conversations and the silences they shared. Emily's physical healing was evident. She was stronger now, able to move around the hospital room with ease, and her smile, though still tinged with uncertainty, was becoming more frequent. But emotionally, she was a little more guarded. Jason understood. He had hurt her deeply, and healing from that wasn't something that could be fixed with words or promises. It would take time. Time that Jason was willing to give her, no matter how long it took. He had made his share of mistakes, but now, he wanted to prove that he had changed. One evening, As the setting sun cast a soft glow across the hospital room, Emily sat up in bed, her eyes distant as she gazed out the window. Jason noticed the shift in her mood and moved to sit beside her. "What's on your mind?" he asked softly, his voice gentle, as though afraid to disturb the fragile peace between them. Emily hesitated, then glanced at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of vulnerability and strength. "I'm not sure what I'm supposed to feel," she confessed quietly. "I've spent so long moving forward without you, and now you're here, trying to be the person I need. But I don't know how to let go of the past." Jason's heart ached at her words, but he remained silent, giving her the space she needed. She was trying to process everything, and that wasn't something he could rush. "I don't expect you to just forget everything," he finally said, his voice low and sincere. "But I need you to know that I'm here, fully here, for you. No more running away, no more pretending that the past didn't matter. I'm ready to face it all, if you'll let me." Emily looked at him for a long moment, her gaze softening. She had heard his words, but she wasn't sure how to respond. There was a part of her that wanted to trust him again, but that part was small and fragile. It had been broken too many times before. "I want to believe you," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want to believe that you're really here for me." Jason reached out slowly, gently taking her hand in his. The simple touch, the warmth of her skin against his, felt like a lifeline. "I am, Emily," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "I'm not going anywhere." The moment hung in the air between them, heavy with the weight of their shared history and the hope for what could be. Emily squeezed his hand, a small but significant gesture that told him more than words ever could. Jason smiled, his heart swelling with the quiet promise of something new. But just as quickly as the moment came, it was replaced by a lingering uncertainty. The past wasn't something that could be erased, and the road to redemption was a long one. But it was a road they were both willing to walk together. That night, as Jason lay awake in the hospital room, the weight of the day's conversation still on his mind, he realized how much he had taken for granted. Emily had given him a second chance, something he had never deserved. And now, he had to prove that he was worthy of it. But proving himself wasn't going to be easy. He couldn't undo the damage he had done, and the scars they both carried would never fully disappear. But he could try, and that was enough. In the days that followed, Jason made a conscious effort to be there for Emily, not just as a man seeking redemption, but as someone who genuinely cared. They spent more time together, talking about everything and nothing. They revisited old memories, laughed at inside jokes they had once shared, and quietly healed in the presence of each other. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for the first time in years, Jason felt like he was finally living in the present, not trapped by the past. But even as they grew closer, there was always the quiet tension of unspoken words, the nagging question of whether their future could truly be different. Could they rebuild what they had lost? Or would the past always stand in the way? One afternoon, Emily surprised him by asking for a walk. It was the first time since her recovery that she had wanted to leave the hospital room, and Jason couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. As they walked through the hospital garden, the sunlight filtering through the trees, Jason realized how much he had missed the simple moments, the moments when things were easy, when they were just together. Emily stopped for a moment, taking in the view, and Jason joined her, standing side by side in comfortable silence. It was in these moments, these quiet exchanges, that Jason felt the weight of their journey together. They weren't there yet, but they were moving forward. Slowly, but surely. As the day wore on, Jason couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, he believed in the possibility of a future with Emily. He didn't know what it would look like, but he was willing to take the next step. Together. Weeks passed, and the quiet routine that had settled between Jason and Emily began to shift. What had started as small, tentative steps toward healing slowly grew into something deeper. Emily had come a long way in her recovery, both physically and emotionally, but the true test was still ahead. The scars of their past were still there, but they were becoming less defining. It wasn't easy for either of them. The silent moments between them still held weight, and there were times when the past crept in, threatening to pull them back into the darkness they had once shared. But they both knew that the only way forward was through it. One evening, as Jason and Emily sat together in the quiet of the hospital room, Jason broke the silence. I know we're still working through everything, but his voice faltered, and he paused, gathering his thoughts. Emily turned to face him, her eyes soft but still guarded. But, she asked, sensing the weight of his words. Jason took a deep breath. I need to ask you something. His heart raced as he tried to find the courage to voice the question that had been on his mind for days. Emily's gaze never left his, waiting patiently. Do you think that we could have a future? A real future? The words hung in the air between them, heavy with the unspoken fears that both of them carried. Emily didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked down at her hands, her fingers tracing the lines of the hospital blanket. She had heard Jason's words, but the reality of what he was asking hit her harder than she had expected. Could they have a future? She wasn't sure. There were so many unknowns, so many risks. But as she looked at him, sitting there before her, she knew one thing for certain. He wasn't the same man who had walked away from her years ago. That man had been selfish, distant, consumed by his ambition. But the man sitting before her now was different. He was vulnerable, open, and ready to face the consequences of his actions. Slowly, Emily spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, Jason, she said, her eyes meeting his. I don't know if we can go back to what we were, but maybe we can find something new, something different. Jason's heart surged with hope, but it was tempered by the uncertainty in her voice. He understood. They couldn't go back. The past was gone, and all they had was the present. And in that moment, Jason realized that maybe that was enough. Maybe it wasn't about trying to recreate what they had, but about building something new, something stronger. I'm okay with that, Jason replied softly, his voice filled with a quiet determination. I don't want to go back. I just want to move forward. With you, if you're willing. Emily looked at him, her heart swelling with emotion. She had never imagined that she would be here, in this moment, questioning everything she thought she knew about love, about trust, and about forgiveness. But now, in the presence of the man she had once loved and lost, she felt something new stir inside her. It wasn't a rush of passion or certainty. It was something quieter, deeper, a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, they could build something real together. I'm willing, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Jason's face softened as a smile spread across his lips. It was small, but it was enough. They had a long road ahead of them, and neither of them knew where it would lead. But they had made a choice to try, and that, in itself, was more than they had before. The days that followed were filled with small steps forward. They spent more time together, talking about everything and nothing. They shared their hopes, their fears, and even the things they had kept hidden from each other for so long. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of doubt, moments when the weight of their past threatened to pull them back. But there were also moments of connection, moments when they both felt like they were truly seeing each other for the first time in years. One afternoon, as the sunlight streamed through the hospital window, Jason took Emily's hand in his thumb brushing over her knuckles. I know we can't undo the past, he said quietly, his gaze fixed on their joined hands. But I want to make sure the future is worth it. Worth everything we've been through. Emily smiled. Softly, her eyes meeting his. We'll make it worth it, she said, her voice filled with quiet certainty. In that moment, they both knew that the journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was a journey they were willing to take together. It was a journey of healing, of forgiveness, and of hope. And no matter what, they would face it side by side. The days stretched on, each one feeling like a small victory in their quiet journey of rediscovery. Jason and Emily had settled into a new rhythm, one filled with subtle moments of connection and healing. The past, once a heavy burden that weighed them both down, was now something they chose to confront together, rather than allowing it to continue to define them. Yet, there was still an unspoken tension lingering beneath the surface. Jason could feel it. He knew that while Emily had begun to open her heart to him again, the scars of their history were not something she could simply erase. And, as much as he wanted to move forward, he knew that the true test of their relationship was still ahead. One evening, as the soft glow of the setting sun filtered through the hospital window, casting long shadows across the room, Jason and Emily sat together in silence. It had become their favorite time of day, the quiet moments, just the two of them, when words weren't necessary. But tonight, there was something different in the air. Emily's hand was resting in his, her fingers lightly tracing the lines of his palm. She had been distant lately, her eyes filled with thoughts that she wasn't yet ready to share. Jason didn't want to push her, but he couldn't help the concern that had settled in his chest. "Emily," he began softly, his voice barely above a whisper. She looked up at him, her eyes searching his face, as though weighing her words. "I've been thinking about everything," she said, her voice hesitant. "About us, about the future." Jason's heart skipped a beat. He had expected this moment to come, but hearing her say it out loud made the reality of their situation more real than ever before. "What about it?" he asked gently, afraid of what she might say, but willing to hear it. Emily paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "I think I'm ready. Ready to move forward. With you," she said, her voice steady but filled with vulnerability. Jason's heart surged, but he kept his expression neutral, not wanting to appear too eager. "But," he prompted, sensing there was more she needed to say. Emily looked down at their joined hands, her thumb tracing the back of his hand in slow, deliberate motions. "But I'm scared," she admitted quietly, her voice breaking just a little. "I'm scared of what comes next. What if we're not ready? What if I'm not ready?" Jason's chest tightened at the rawness in her voice. He knew that fear all too well. The fear of trying again, of facing the possibility that things might not work out. But he also knew that they couldn't let fear dictate their future. "We don't have to have all the answers right now," he said softly, his thumb gently brushing against her knuckles. "We just have to take it one step at a time. Together." Emily's eyes met his, searching for reassurance. Jason gave her a small, soft smile, one that conveyed everything he felt. He wasn't asking for perfection. He wasn't asking for her to trust him completely, not yet. He was simply asking for a chance to prove that he was worthy of her, worthy of the love they once had, and the love they could build again. Emily took a deep breath and, after a long pause, nodded. "Okay," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "One step at a time." Jason squeezed her hand gently, relief flooding through him. They were finally on the same page, ready to face the unknown together, no matter how difficult it might be. The future was uncertain, and there would be obstacles ahead, but in that moment, he believed that they could overcome anything. They had already made it through so much. They could make it through whatever came next. The days that followed were filled with small, incremental steps. They spent more time together, learning to trust each other again, rediscovering the parts of themselves that had been lost during their time apart. Jason had no illusions that the path would be easy. But with Emily by his side, he was ready to face whatever came their way. One afternoon, as they sat together in the hospital garden, enjoying the warmth of the sun on their faces, Emily turned to Jason with a thoughtful expression. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice soft but steady. "Maybe it's time we start planning for the future. Not just in the hospital, but outside of it." Jason's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" he asked, his curiosity piqued. Emily smiled slightly, the first real smile he had seen from her in a while. "I mean, maybe it's time we start living again. Together." Jason felt a rush of hope fill him. This was the moment he had been waiting for. "You're ready?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. Emily nodded, her smile growing a little wider. "I think so. I want to be. For us." Jason couldn't help the way his chest swelled with pride and love for her. She had come so far. They both had. And now, they were ready to move forward. Together. It wasn't going to be easy, but nothing worth having ever was. And as Jason looked into Emily's eyes, he knew that this was just the beginning. They still had so much to learn, so much to rebuild. But for the first time in a long time, he believed in the possibility of their future. He believed in them. The days that followed were filled with a mixture of anticipation and quiet reflection. Jason and Emily had agreed to take it slow, to let their relationship evolve naturally. They had started to rediscover each other, but there were still moments of uncertainty, moments when the past seemed like an insurmountable wall between them. However, each day brought a small victory, a small step closer to healing. Jason knew that rebuilding their relationship wouldn't happen overnight. He was learning to be patient, to listen, to understand that Emily needed time. There were days when they simply sat together, not saying much, just being in each other's presence. And that, Jason realized, was enough. The moments of silence no longer felt heavy. They felt peaceful. And in the quiet of those moments, Jason could feel something changing between them. One afternoon, as the sun began to set and the sky turned a soft shade of orange, Jason took Emily to a nearby park. It was the first time since her recovery that they had gone out together, and the air was filled with the gentle sounds of nature, birds chirping in the trees and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. As they walked along the path, Emily stopped and turned to him, her eyes searching his face. "Jason," she said softly, her voice full of uncertainty. "Do you ever wonder if we're making a mistake?" The question took him by surprise, but Jason didn't hesitate. He had thought about the same thing countless times. "Every day," he admitted quietly. "But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try." Emily looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "But what if it's too late? What if we can't fix what's broken?" Jason reached out and gently took her hand, holding it in his. The touch was simple, yet filled with meaning. "We can't go back, Emily," he said, his voice steady. "But we can move forward. We can rebuild. And we don't have to do it all at once. One step at a time." Emily didn't say anything for a moment, her gaze drifting toward the horizon. The weight of his words hung in the air, but Jason could feel her slowly relaxing, the tension in her shoulders easing. She nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "One step at a time," she repeated, as if the words themselves held a certain power. And for the first time in a long time, Jason felt the knot in his chest loosen. He didn't have all the answers, and he knew that there were still obstacles ahead. But for the first time in years, he felt hopeful. He wasn't sure where the path would lead them, but he knew they would walk it together. The next few weeks were a time of gradual progress. Jason and Emily continued to spend time together, slowly rebuilding the foundation of trust that had been shattered all those years ago. They shared small moments of joy, quiet laughter, and even the occasional awkward silence. But through it all, Jason could feel their connection growing stronger, little by little. One evening, as they sat together on the couch in Emily's apartment, Jason noticed how peaceful it felt. The apartment was modest, but there was something about the simplicity of it that felt right. Emily was finally home, and the weight of the hospital rooms and sterile walls seemed like a distant memory. They had both been through so much, but now they were creating new memories. Memories that would shape the future they were building together. "I can't believe we're here," Emily said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Jason looked at her, his heart swelling with emotion. "Neither can I," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. Emily turned to face him, her eyes filled with something Jason couldn't quite place. "Do you think we'll make it?" she asked, her voice vulnerable. Jason hesitated, searching her face for the answer. He knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he also knew that, with her by his side, they had a chance. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I'm willing to try. For us." Emily smiled, a real smile this time, one that reached her eyes. It was a smile that spoke volumes, a smile that said she was willing to take that chance, too. "Then let's try," she said softly. And in that moment, Jason realized that this was it. This was their chance. They had faced the darkest parts of their past, and now, together, they were ready to face whatever the future held. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but they were no longer walking it alone. They were walking it together. And for the first time in years, Jason believed that the future could be bright. He didn't know exactly what it would look like, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to let go. Not this time. Weeks passed, and the quiet stability that had begun to settle between Jason and Emily started to feel more like a reality than a fragile dream. They had faced their demons, both individually and together, and now, as they stood at the edge of their future, it was clear that their journey was just beginning. There were still obstacles to face, moments of doubt that would inevitably arise, but Jason knew that with Emily by his side, they could weather anything. One morning, as they sat together over coffee in the small kitchen of Emily's apartment, Jason looked across the table at her, feeling a surge of warmth. The woman sitting in front of him, once distant and full of sorrow, was now someone he could imagine a future with. "I never thought we'd get here," he said softly, his voice filled with awe. Emily smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners as she met his gaze. "Neither did I," she said quietly, the weight of their shared history still there, but no longer defining them. "But we made it." Jason nodded, his heart full of gratitude. They had come so far, and yet, there was still so much more ahead of them. "And we're just getting started," he replied, a new sense of hope in his voice. They had learned that love wasn't about perfection, it was about resilience. It was about choosing each other day after day, despite the challenges, despite the scars, and despite the fear that would sometimes creep in. As the days continued to pass, they built new routines. They laughed more, shared more, and most importantly, they forgave. Jason had asked for Emily's forgiveness, but what he hadn't anticipated was the healing that would come from forgiving himself. Together, they worked through the remnants of the past, and with each step, their bond grew stronger. There were moments of uncertainty, of course. Moments when Emily would pull back, her old wounds threatening to resurface. And there were times when Jason would feel the sting of his past mistakes, wondering if he could truly make up for the years he had wasted. But every time that happened, they would remind each other of the progress they had made, of how far they had come. It wasn't about erasing the past. It was about building something new from the ashes of what had once been. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, Emily turned to Jason, a soft smile playing on her lips. "You know," she began, her voice thoughtful, "I've been thinking about the future." Jason raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What about it?" he asked. Emily took a deep breath, her gaze turning toward the horizon. "I don't know what it holds," she said softly, "but I know that I want you in it. I want us in it, no matter what comes our way." Jason's heart skipped a beat. Her words were simple, yet they carried more weight than anything he had heard in a long time. "Emily," he stopped himself, overwhelmed by the emotion that rose within him. "I want that too, more than anything." Emily smiled, her eyes shining with something Jason couldn't quite put into words. It was hope, maybe. Or maybe it was something deeper. "Then we'll take it one day at a time, together," she whispered, the promise, in her voice carrying a quiet strength. And with that, Jason knew they were ready for whatever the future held. It wouldn't always be easy. There would be challenges, moments of doubt, and days when they would need to lean on each other more than ever. But Jason had learned something over the past few months. Love was about showing up, even when it was hard. It was about being there, even when the past seemed impossible to forget. And most importantly, it was about forgiveness. Forgiving each other. Forgiving themselves. Together, they could face anything. As they sat there, wrapped in the warmth of each other's presence, Jason felt a sense of peace settle over him. They had come through the storm, and now, they were ready to start their new chapter. They had made it. Together. And as the city lights flickered below, Jason couldn't help but feel that, for the first time in a long time, everything was exactly as it should be. It was a new beginning. For them both. This story is a reminder that love is not just about finding the perfect person, but about being the perfect person for each other. It's about growth, forgiveness, and the courage to start again, no matter how difficult the journey may seem. If you found this story meaningful, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel for more emotional stories like this, and share it with someone who might need a little inspiration today. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.